All right. Okay, welcome to our parenting class. We are doing this together. I have a guest with me today.
Yay.
This is Lolly.
Hi.
And Lolly actually works with Nexus, which is one of the people that we are doing this combined effort with. So just a reminder, I'm Becky Montoya. I'm a mental health specialist with the Blue Ridge Unified School District, and I have a small private practice. And this is going to be our 5th parenting class. So if you're watching this and this is your first time, there are 4 other parenting classes that kind of build up to what we're talking about today. And this is being offered as a collaboration with Blue Ridge School District and Nexus Coalition, and it's through our grant that we've got from Blue Cross Blue Shield. And the grant project is called Not All Wounds Are Visible, Educating on Mental Health. So Lolly, real quick, you're a parent.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how many kids you have.
Okay. So I have 3 kids. My oldest is 20, and he's actually in the Navy in their nuclear engineering program. And then I have Dominic, who's a freshman at Shoalo High School. And I have Allie, who is 12, and she's at Shoalo High School too.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you're just new to the community.
I am new. I just moved out here mid-September-ish. So yes.
Getting to know. Lolly does a lot of work for us here at Blue Ridge Junior High, and we sure appreciate her and the work she's doing with the young people and supporting them with Nexus and through this grant. Just a reminder, I always like to do this reminder that in theory, Lolly's also trained in some of these concepts and skills, and in theory, we're pretty on board with doing the right things, but in practice, would you agree? It's hard.
It is hard. No, I think sometimes we have to dumb it down a little bit for these kids and just kind of get at their level. Not that they're dumb, but do you know what I mean? Just
keep it simple and
keep
straightforward.
it simple and straightforward, absolutely.
Yeah. And as far as parenting, when we know all the right things to do, it doesn't mean we're very good at doing them.
Yeah, no, it's tough. Right now, actually, my son got in trouble and I had to take his door down. I found that taking the door was more effective than taking the electronics.
You got to find the thing that works with that child.
Yeah.
That's
so, and it worked, and his door has been off for a little bit, but his attitude's changed, and chores are getting done, and schedule's getting good for sleeping and stuff, so yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and that's a really good point. What works for one child is not necessarily going to work for another. I've had kids that taking away a phone privilege would do absolutely nothing, taking away a friend privilege would, and vice versa. So we just have to be sensitive to that. The books that I referenced through this class is the one, The Teenage Brain. Love this book by Frances E. Jensen. A fabulous book if you want to understand what is and maybe isn't going on in your young person's brain. This is not a diss on young people. This is just science. This is just the development that they're going through. If you want to learn about the teenage brain, take a look at this book. And then I love The Whole Brain Child by Daniel Siegel. And he also has a workbook that gives practical application to the book. So it's The Whole Brain Child, the book, and the workbook. And we reference some of the learning that I'm sharing is going to come from these particular resources. In the first class, we talked about how the teenage brain is operating from suboptimal choice behavior. It is driven by the feel-goods. The teenage brain is not wired to assess for risk. That just makes a lot of sense. If you've ever been around a teenager, they're not assessing for risk. They are hunting for reward. And that's the way their brain is designed. And so that's going to be part of the process of getting them, as they're working through that brain development, we're all going to be kind of shaking our head going, what in the world were you thinking? Bottom line is they really weren't accessing that information, being able to connect the dots of the consequences. And so it doesn't mean we give them a pass. It means we help them start to establish what those consequences are so that we can see those connections start to take place. In the second parenting class, we talked about parenting with the brain in mind. And we talked about the left side of the brain, which is the more solution, practical hemisphere of the brain. And then we talked about the nonlinear right side of the brain. and how what we really want to do is bring the whole brain together when we're parenting. And one of the most effective ways to do that is to connect emotionally with our child before we redirect. It's a lot more instinctive for some of us to start with the redirect. And then because we haven't made the emotional connection, we're not inviting the child's whole brain to participate, and we're maybe not using our whole brain to make that communication either. So it's important that we are connecting and then redirecting.
I think that kind of makes sense, because when like Dominic, it was because of his grades. He got an F in art, which I feel like, how do you have A's and B's and then you have an F in art, right? Like that's just laziness. So when I confronted him, he just had a bad attitude about it. And so once I took the door, I think it made him a little angry, but I just walked away and let him cool off. And then a few days later, he came to me actually and was like, okay, how can I make this better? What can I do to get my door back? And it was good to be able to sit down, and I think that's when it kind of clicked for him, like, that's all you want? Like, yeah, that's all I want, you know? And so yeah, he's been working on it, and it's been good.
I'm glad. That's a great example of that connection and then the redirection. And I am a redirector. It is going to be my instinct, redirect. Here's what you got to do. Like, I'm upset with how this I'm upset with what happened. I need you to do A, B, and C. And this approach is saying, work on establishing an emotional connection with the young person, and then you can kind of go through that ABC as well. So that was what we learned in our second parenting class. In the third parenting class, we explored the parenting styles, and these have been developed over years. It started with Baumrind's work in the 60s, and it was added to significantly by Maccoby and Martin in the 80s. And since then, it's just been expanded and expanded. And if you like this worksheet, you can scroll down on the Counselor Lady page, and it's there in a printable version. But it's basically talking about the parenting styles and how the 4 different quadrants of the parenting style, and how the most effective parenting style is what we call the authoritative parenting style. It does have that connect and redirect focus, a let's work together. It's very responsive with expectations. There's emotional connection from the right brain, logic and reason from the left brain. And so it's a really great approach. And then there's permissive parenting style. This is more of connect emotionally and then just give in to whatever they want. The authoritarian parenting style is command and demand. And that one is basically where the parent's like, because I said so. There's not a lot of connection, but there are a lot of expectations, but not a lot of connection. And then we have the apathetic parenting style, and this is where the parent has actually withdrawn and detached themselves. And usually it has to do with the parent having gone through some really challenging things. And we move around in these parenting styles. We're not necessarily set in one of them. But when we explore the parenting styles, it helps us remember we really want to be in that top right authoritative parenting style. That's going to help us be the most effective. All right, and then in the fourth class, we talked about engaging instead of enraging. And so just like we want to integrate the right hemisphere with the left hemisphere, we also want to be aware of the frontal lobe, which is at the front of the brain, and the brain stem, and bringing all of that energy together. So the frontal lobe is where we make logical and reasonable decisions. It's where we plan, balance emotions in our body. It's where we have self-understanding and reflection, empathy and morality. It helps us think before we act. The bottom of the brain, there's a tiny little knob at the top of the spinal column. And this knob is responsible for those instincts to freeze, to flight, to take off, or to fight. And that little knob only really helps us function in those responses. These are really autonomic. Well, it also includes our autonomic functions like breathing and blinking, and the strong emotions of fear, anger, and excitement. So when the frontal lobe and the brainstem are integrated and working together, we're able to perform complex tasks, and we can consider the consequences before acting, And we can consider the feelings of others, which we know young people struggle to always think about the feelings of others. So our work up until today has really been focused on using the integrated full brain, being aware of the developmental things going on with the teenage brain, supporting the people that we support by using our whole brain in our parenting style, because that's an invitation for our young people to use their whole brain as well. Today, I know that was a good summary, huh? A long summary just to get to this. Today, Lolly, we are going to get into what's called using the remote of the brain.
Okay.
Or the remote of the mind. And this is going to focus more on memory. Memory have gotten a lot of attention over the years, and not always in a good way. And I don't know if you have memories maybe with your siblings growing up where you might recall the very same event in very different ways. Have you ever had that? Or with someone?
Yeah, I think with my brother, growing up, we were kind of treated a little different. So, yeah, he has a totally different perspective of different events than I do.
Yeah.
And he was 5 years younger, too. So that can...
He was bringing a different lens to it altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is really interesting that some of, the same people can have participated in an event and have very different takeaways. Their memory can be very different. And for that reason, I just want to lead today's topic by clarifying that the specifics of what we remember may be recalled differently than other people who were also participating. But the importance of using memory in our wellness isn't so that we can recall every single detail, but it's so that we can explore how we felt, how we responded to the experience, and what our takeaways from that event were. Yeah. That's really the important thing. So it's not hashing out the specifics of the details. We're never really going to do that. They've proven that with witnesses to crimes. People will be like, oh, he was wearing a gray hoodie. Oh, he was wearing a black t-shirt. And they are all insisting that that's what they saw, and they were all there, but it's just that memory. Those specific details may not be recalled the same, but they can tell you how they felt, and they can tell you, that energy and what they learned from being at that event.
Yeah, I think, so just recently we were, it was my husband's anniversary of his passing, and me and my two kids at our home, we sat in the morning and talked about what they remember about that day and what they were feeling. And we had never done that before. So it was really interesting just hearing their different points of views of that day and what they remembered, and what they don't remember, because for them too, it was like they had a certain memories, but then they just don't remember anything because it just happened so fast. And I never even looked at that. Like, I never paid attention to what they had gone through, I guess.
I love that you're sharing this example, and I have talked to you a little bit about your husband's passing before, and I just want to extend that I am so sorry you guys went through that. How many years ago was that?
So we're going on almost 8 years, and yeah, like I said, it was because it's been 8 years, and we finally are able to sit down and talk about what they remembered, their memories, what they felt like. So it was a good little, like, kind of closure, not a closure, but do you know what I mean?
A growing experience. Yeah. And I think you're going to find what we talk about next really interesting in that context. Put my reading glasses on. So explicit memories are the memories that we are aware of, like a vacation we took, an activity that caused an injury, the passing of your husband. Those are very explicit events. Mm-hmm. When a child was born, explicit memory is the recall of a specific, factual, or autobiographical point of time. We can consciously reflect on these memories knowing they are experiences from our past. Mm-hmm. So another type of memory that we want to talk about today is something we call implicit memory.
Okay.
And implicit memories may or may not be tied to a specific event, but implicit memories create mental models or expectations about the world based on what has gone on in the past. implicit memories shape what we believe and how we perceive things to be right now. So for example, our past experiences may support the implicit memory that I will be comforted when I am upset. The opposite could also be true. We might have implicit memories that support the mental model, I will not be comforted when I am upset. Implicit memories allow us to automate our responses without having to recall the events that created these responses. Implicit memory encodes perceptions, emotions, sensation, and many of the behaviors that we would initiate without really thinking, kind of our reactions and our responses. Sometimes we have implicit memories, like we might, for example, I will not be comforted when I'm upset. Maybe we are able to tie that implicit memory to an explicit memory as well. We might be able to go, that has to do with this thing that happened. But often we aren't making those connections. So when we start talking about using the remote of the mind, we're encouraging ourselves as the parents and our ability to interact with the children we support to start exploring memories, explicit and implicit, to start to understand the behaviors that we're choosing. Implicit memory is active in shaping our here and now experiences, and it may create a mental model that is irrational that needs to be worked through. For example, if we have refusals or avoidance, regression, fears, or unexpectedly strong reactions, or our children have those, if we're starting to notice that our child's avoiding something that maybe they hadn't avoided before, or they're regressing in their progress on something, they're demonstrating fear or having these unexpected strong reactions, we're going to take notice to that.
Yeah.
Some of that's going to fall in the typical range of ups and downs of a regular day. But if we're starting to see something that we hadn't noticed before, we're going to take notice. And the very first thing we want to do is explore, we call it the acronym HALT. Mm-hmm. An acronym HALT would have us going, is our child, or am I, because we also experience these, am I hungry? Am I angry about something? Am I lonely or tired? So HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Often that's going to explain the challenging behavior we're noticing. But if we've started to resolve that and we're like, okay, it's not about hunger, it doesn't seem to be about anger or being lonely or tired, then we might want to consider, has there been a new event that my child experienced, something that's changed in their routine, maybe something different at school or in the home, that maybe we could explore explicit and implicit memories to connect some dots here. So once we've resolved for ourselves or our children that hunger, anger, lonely, tired, and we're still experiencing these concerning behaviors, then it could have to do with a memory, something that they've perceived or had happen. And maybe it's resulted in them establishing a new mental model that's responsible for part of the presenting concern. So I'm going to give a quick example, and then I've got a good one in here. I, as a young child, really loved dogs. Okay. But I have multiple experiences of dogs. Like, as a little kid, I had a dog bite me in the face. Like, I was little, and the dog was actually little, and I got bitten in the face. And that changed. I now had I had an explicit memory of being bitten in the face, and then a lot of implicit mental models were created from that, where I started to have a fear of a dog. And dogs can really sense how you're feeling. So then that mental model continued to be established, because when I would be around dogs, I would bring that fear, and I would often have a growling dog. And I even got bit again as a 12-year-old on my legs by a dog. So I just kind of got reinforced to where I started to have this fear of dogs. And I could tie that back to a couple of events, but it's also those implicit memories that were shaped that created this mental model about dogs. The example that was used in the whole brain child is the example of a person who has a dislike for math and public speaking. And when trying to determine why they have that dislike, they can't really pin it down other than to say they remember it occurring sometime when they moved to their new school. They'd moved to a new school. And so they have this idea that it was from moving to this new school. But once they start really exploring some of the events that happened at the new school, they were able to remember some of the implicit experiences or memories that probably have shaped their current dislike of math and public speaking. So the way it was charted out, when that young person originally moved to the new school, they did like math. They even thought they were excellent in the subject. They had a math teacher at the new school that would call students up to the board to work the problems out in front of the class. The problems were much more difficult than they had been at the previous school. The person remembers standing at the board, feelings of panic, sweating, heart pounding, and saying to themselves, I know I can't solve these problems. They remember freezing at the board, having the teacher point out the mistakes that students would make on the board work, hearing snickers in the class, feelings of anger and embarrassment and humiliation, and then starting to feel anxious to attend the math class. So now they've been able to take the explicit memory of moving to the new school, that move, and that's a significant event, but a lot of the implicit memories that built their mental model had to do with those experiences in that math class. So it wasn't just move to a new school, now I don't like math or public speaking. It was move to a new school and then all of these different things that kind of resulted in this new mental model. And we could chart that out. In fact, in the workbook, they have like this diagram where you kind of put the original memory, you can tie it to your new belief, and then they have you kind of work in all of the implicit mental model changers that brought you from there to here.
Okay.
And why that's helpful, like this conversation you had with your kids about your husband passing away.
Yeah.
That's a huge explicit event that is a factual autobiographical event that happened in your kids' lives. Mm-hmm. There's likely I'm sure there's some implicit memories, good, and to just be clear, our implicit memories can also shape us in very positive ways, like that that this happened, my dad died unexpectedly, and also there can be a lot of experiences showing I was seen and I was heard and I could share my feelings and all of these things that could lead us to be in a really secure place. And so it's not about just picking apart what's not working for us and our children. It's also considering what do we want to be working for our kids and how do we create both the explicit family events along with responding to our children in ways to help build those implicit mental models that help them to be securely attached and securely operating in the world that they live in now.
And I'm kind of glad you shared that because so like with my kids in the beginning, whenever they would do something wrong or get in trouble, I would be like, if dad was here, this is what would happen, or he would do it this way, And I didn't realize until now that they're older and they are able to tell me how they feel is it bothers them when I would say that because he wasn't here. You know what I mean? And for me, it was more like trying to tell the kids like, you're lucky you're getting away with some stuff because if dad was here,
he would bring the hammer down.
Yeah, absolutely. Like all I had to do was, I'm going to tell dad back when he was around. But I didn't have that anymore. So I was using that as a tool to help me. But then I learned that the kids hate it. It bothers them. It hurts them because he's not here. And it took my middle kid to finally tell me that. Like, don't do that anymore. And it was kind of cool because I felt like he was able to make himself heard.
And he felt, and he made himself heard, and it's great that you were able to see and hear that. Yeah. A lot of times when we've had a traumatic or significant event, either a divorce or a death in the family, or there's a whole variety of ones we could put in that list, our children might know that the parent is so sensitive about that topic that they don't feel like they can safely broach that subject with their parent, and they avoid it and they don't bring it up. And in a parent's defense, we're doing life for the first time too. So Lolly hadn't experienced a significant death like that before, like not of a partner. And strategizing how to support her kids and how to support herself, there's a lot of room for error, compassionate error in that process. But it sounds like you guys got to a space where he was like, yeah, I'm going to let mom know. I don't really like when she uses that comparison or uses that phrase.
And I think as a parent, I walked out of that conversation feeling a little relief that he was able to share that with me. Like, okay, wow, I wish I would have known. Do you know what I mean? Earlier.
Seriously,
but he probably didn't feel comfortable. Like you said, he probably knew I was hurting and all these things and stuff like that. But yeah, so now it's nice. And I have to remind myself when things get a little heated, like, don't use that one. You know? So,
and that's hard because in theory you're like, oh, I know that I don't want to use that one. But when the emotions rise, we might be more inclined to throw it out there. And it's okay if we throw something out there that we remember later, oh, I don't really want to use that way of talking anymore or use that particular phrase. It's okay to go back and let our children know, I'm trying to do better on that. I know I used that phrase or said that again, and I am aware that you guys don't like that, and I'm working on changing that. Yeah. Because we're just humans, man. Yeah. Grown-ups, we're a mess. Just throw them in it right here. So by using the remote of the mind, I've been able to look at my fear of dogs with an understanding of the mental models I've created over my lifetime. Lolly's being able to determine some things with her kids from a significant event in their life with their dad passing away. This example, the person who was afraid or they had a dislike of math and public speaking, they were able to look at it and see more of the pieces that contributed to that mental model. And that's a huge win. So when we, if our children have gone through something hard, if we've gone through a divorce, we might think the best thing to do is just not talk about this. We just don't want to talk about it. It's raw. We don't want to trash talk each other. And we shouldn't trash talk the other parent. That's true. But avoiding talking about the fact that we're living in different homes, that's not supporting the young person. They are definitely having mental models start to form implicitly, whether we talk to them or not about it. And so being able to talk to them about it, being able to let them share the feelings that they're having related to that event is going to give them a safe space to start to develop healthy coping. And if we're not the person who can do it, supporting our young people with other adults or trained experts to help them do that is really important. If our kids have been in a car accident, we might be inclined to think, oh, we shouldn't talk about that. They probably don't want to talk about that. Even a very young child will benefit from being able to talk about how, you were riding in that car and another car hit the car. And that was really scary, and they had to bring an ambulance. And even if everyone was okay, it's still a lot has been shaped in that child's mind from that event. That's a big event. So being able to kind of speak about it, even frequently, and sometimes the outcome might not be that everybody was okay, but being able to talk about those memories and value their feelings moving forward is going to give them that feeling of, when I need comfort, I'm comforted, and I'm able to speak about the things that have gone on in my life.
I think I do that a lot with Ellie. She was a lot younger than the boys. So she's always asking me, like, how did you and dad meet? Like, just wanting different stories. And she's heard them hundreds of times, but even as she gets older, she still wants to hear those stories, and it's kind of cool. And sometimes I'll be like, why don't you tell me the story? Because she's heard it so much, but that's her way of coping, I guess, and learning. And
absolutely learning.
Yeah.
And learning about the connection you had with her dad and the connection he had with his kids is helping her create that mental model about that support too. Yeah. Oh, that's really great. I love that. So as we examine these events, it helps us transition those implicit memories, once we start to, so like the example of the math, the dislike of math and public speaking, once that person was able to go, all right, new move, and now I'm realizing the math teacher, the harder problems, having people do them on the board, they're able to take some of what was shaping them implicitly and creating their mental model, and they're able to create that and pull it more to their consciousness, to that frontal area of awareness, so that they have more awareness and even turn that implicit experience into more of an explicit understanding, so that they, moving forward, they can have some really good self-talk when they're asked to do something that might be like public speaking. They have some understanding and they're able to move through that in a more positive way. Explicit and implicit memories can work in positive ways too, and I want to share a couple of examples of how we can do this. Asking ourselves, what do we want our kids to remember? That's really important. What do we want them to remember explicitly? What events? Do we want to have a tradition of Sunday dinners or sitting at the table together? Do we want to have a tradition of family vacations? So those are events and things we can carve out and actually help create for our family. And then thinking, what do we want their implicit experiences to be? What do we hope their mental models will be about things in their lives, about being seen and heard and valued and able to share things with us? If a young person comes and shares something with you and your reaction is very shock and awe and or being really reactive, that mental model might be, they might be creating a mental model that is saying to them, mom's not a safe place to share new information. She flips her lid. And so it's important to strategize on that as well. And we have influence on creating intentional family events, vacations, traditions, and significant moments. And when our kids recall, we can also talk to them and be like, do you remember when we went on that family vacation? And that's where everybody's going to be like, yeah, this happened. And other people are like, no, it happened this way. But it's just fun to bring up those memories and to remind them of the fun things that they've done. And that can be done easy through journaling, having family discussions, creating memory books. Some people, I know my favorite page to look at on my social media accounts is my own. I mean, it's as fun as it is to stalk the rest of you all. I love to look back at what I've done. Like, oh, I remember this and I remember this, and it's really great. And so creating those things and doing those, sharing those memories with our kids is really great. Helping them learn how to write journals and keep notes, that's really great too, because that's going to be them reflecting. And teaching them to consider not just writing about what they did, but how they felt when they did it.
I kind of do that with music. So after my husband passed, I have a playlist for every year.
Yes.
And I can go back to certain years and just remember what I went through, my struggles, and that I overcame them. You know, because once I hear those songs, those feelings come back, and I'm like, wow, I overcame a lot. Like, I don't feel that way anymore like I did when I first heard that song. So I use music, and I play music all the time at home.
I love that you brought that up. We know that music fires up. When we talk about using the whole brain, when they have looked at the brain images and they play music for people, the whole brain is fired up. So to use music as a way to impact memory and growth, that's a great example.
And it's funny because I'll like put a playlist from like 2017 or something, and I'll catch the kids like when we're in the car, even my 14-year-old, and I can see him lip singing, you know, and I don't say nothing because I don't want him to stop.
Right.
But it's just cool as a parent to see that he's enjoying that too. Like maybe there's memories for him that are different for me during that time. So it's kind of cool.
That is really cool. So we have a lot of persuasive powers over the explicit memories we're creating for our kids, and even the implicit of how we're responding to them when they're bringing us new information or sharing their feelings with us. And maybe carving out, like, can you imagine if our child was sharing something really important to them, maybe something they've been thinking about for a long time, they're not sure how to share it with us, and we stop what we're doing and sit with them and listen, because it's more my natural inclination to be like, yeah, talk, follow me, tell me what you're, and just try to keep getting stuff done, because I'm a get stuff done person. But to actually say, oh, this seems pretty important, let's go sit down on the couch, or let's go for a ride, I really want to give you my full attention.
Yeah. You know what I've done with my kids to kind of do that is I have a date night. So I do once a month, I do a date night with just that one kid.
I love
and
that.
And it can be simple, like making dinner with Dominic. We make dinner together. So I'll have him help marinate or cut things up. Where Allie, it's more shopping, because of course she's a little girl.
Gotta
And
know
she
her
wants-
thing.
Yeah. But it's helped, and we've done that since Dave's passed, and I've done a date night with him, and it works. There's months where we forget or budget is not there, but it's still there.
And that one-on-one time, I did stuff similar. I only have one child at home now, so you're tardy for class. So she gets a lot of one-on-one time, but when I had more kids at home, I liked doing things like that too. It was really meaningful to carve out. And a child that really is challenging in the sibling group is usually quite fun one-on-one. Like, they're usually that giving yourself the opportunity to not always be parenting them in the sibling group, but to get to know them individually is really valuable.
Yeah.
I love that. So again, asking ourselves, what do we want our kids to remember? How do we want them to remember us interacting with them? And that's going to be a helpful way in us. We can just pull that question out anytime. Like, if they come to us with something shocking, maybe we ask ourselves that question, what do I want them to remember about this interaction? And then we can move forward with a little more wisdom in how we pause and support them. All of this is connecting and engaging this idea of using memories, the remote of the mind, being able to recall things and see how the recall is impacting the here and now. All of these things is supporting the integrated approach of the whole brain with our children. That self-awareness in these best parenting approaches, sometimes it's going to result with us having these amazing changes in our relationship with our children. Sometimes we're going to really see the child have some growth and start following in a way that we're just so proud of, and we just think, wow, this is going so good. Sometimes we're going to be doing and practicing all of these skills, and we're just going to go, why don't they get it? I'm not seeing those changes. And sometimes when that's the case, we need to consult with experts and learn a little bit more about what's going on. Sometimes it's still in the typical range, and we just need to allow that growth, that brain development to occur. But the bottom line is, the product of good parenting is the parent. If we are becoming better versions of ourselves, if we're learning more patience, if we're learning how to see and hear people and love with kindness and compassion, then becoming the best versions of ourselves, that's really what we have charge over. And that's what we need to focus on, is that ability to work on us.
Absolutely. I mean, and you were talking about the kids sometimes not getting it. You know, I have a 20-year-old who's in the Navy now, and I'm surprised how much he'll call me now and ask me like basic things like, you know, covers and sheets and like things that he just didn't care about because I did as a parent. But now that he's older and he's living on his own and he's calling me, it's such a good feeling as a parent, like, that I'm able to do that. And I tell them all the time, like, I'm not here to be your friend, I'm here to be your parent, but we will be friends later. And I remember when I had that first conversation with my older son, because he had called me for advice, and I'm like, look, kid, I can give you my advice and what I would do, but ultimately it's your decision. Mm-hmm. Like, you're an adult now. But just him calling me and asking me and wanting to know what my thoughts were. And then that's when I told him, like, we can be friends now. Like, we can hang out and you can talk to me about things we didn't talk about before.
Yeah, it changes, kind of evolves.
Yeah.
And I like that you approach that by saying, even when our kids don't ask for our advice, but we're trying to give them some insights, I like what you said, that ultimately it's going to be their decision. And that's even true somewhat with the kids that still live at home. We can't always run interference in keeping them from making some crappy choices. I mean, that is just going to sometimes happen. but we can be there to support them and work through the aftermath of some of those choices. And by working through the aftermath, that's how we start to get some of the teenage brain plugged in and building those neural connections. The science behind the science behind brain stuff altogether is so fascinating. And we all have the opportunity to have growth and make new connections and be more successful in our interactions. I really appreciate you.
Yeah,
I finally had someone show up for a parenting class.
This is good.
Yeah, so we will have another parenting class. I think we have one in March and April. I think those might be the last time. I'm not sure. But so glad that you joined us. We'll make this available for watching later, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.